Hello, my name is Krista Perryman and I'm a reading coach at Trenton Elementary School in Gilchrist County, Florida. And I decided to do my observing video on Standard 2, Principal as an educational leader, and go in and observe a colleague's classroom through the lens of an administrator, specifically noting learning differences and multicultural awareness, gender sensitivity, and ethnic appreciation. I chose this particular activity because as reading coach, part of my job description is I'm supposed to go in and do what's called a fidelity check. And within these fidelity checks, I am to be in the room for 90 minutes of the reading block, observing their instructional strategies, whether or not they have appropriate centers in place, if they are adhering to the curriculum in which we have implemented here in our county, and things of that sort. So I'm definitely looking at the instructional end of things, but I'm looking at it more in the sense of areas in which I can help the teacher improve. So I wanted to kind of do it more as in the lens of an administrator who is going in there, and we're a Marzano school. So when our administrators go in, they're looking for those the domains within the Marzano platform on the placemat and kind of seeing where that teacher falls in those areas. Usually what happens is once an administrator does an eye observation, a formal observation, or even an informal observation, and I've done so many fidelity checks, we will meet together and we will talk about the areas that we need to address, and teachers in which maybe I need to do some modeling in their classroom or maybe some professional development. So we kind of work hand in hand, but we're looking at it a little differently. Where I'm looking at it maybe more on what can I do to help, I think maybe a lot of times the administrator is looking at it in the sense of what help do they need and who do I need to send in to do that help. So I was kind of just curious at how I would look at it differently in that sense. So that's the reason I chose to do that particular activity. I hope that when I go in that I will get to see those differences, and I'm actually kind of predicting that it's going to be very similar in the sense of what I see and what we're looking for. I just think the difference would be in the position I'm in. I would be the one that goes in and assists or does the professional development or such, whereas the administrator, when I identified the issues that needed to be addressed, or even praise whoever, if there's some good things in there, definitely do some praise and bring those moments out. But I think the difference will be that as an administrator, then my job would be to figure out what steps need to be taken to push that teacher or make changes throughout the whole school, and who I need to implement in those areas to make sure it happens. So, thank you.
By the end of the day, to go up to the board. We're not going to cry though. All right. Let's keep going. O. No. Good. Ooh. A. Len. E. D. C. I. Ooh, I haven't done my signal. Ah. Good. O. Jennifer. Good. Ooh. 8. Emma. Good. E. Noah. Good. I. O. Good. Oat. Jory. And ooh. 8. Good job. All right, now we were just blending words together. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take those words apart and we're going to say each sound that we hear in the word. So if I said the word map, When I pull it apart and say sound by sound, I would say ah. So you try it. Map. Ah. Good. Let's try another one. Hot. Wait for my signal. Hot. Good. Hot. See everybody breaking it apart for me. Ant. Ant. Let's try it again. Ant. Ant. Ran. Anthony? Ran. Can you tell me each sound that you hear in the word?
We can't hear them.
What's the first sound? Very good. Pan. Marina? Good job. Pin. Chris? Good. Mud. Mason S? Good. And then had. Everybody? Had. Good. I heard some people do it. Add. Good job. All right. We are going to talk about, since Ms. Rowland was not here yesterday, we're actually going to look at 2 new letters today. All right. And the first one, we're going to flip over one at a time. So let's look at this letter first. Who can tell me, before we flip it over, what do you know about this letter already? What do you know about this letter? Tell me what you know, Vanessa. It is the letter K. What else do we know about the letter K? Madison?
It's a consonant.
It is a consonant. And by looking at our card, how do we know it's a consonant, Jane?
Because it's always black.
It's black. Some of our black letters are consonants. Good job, guys. All right, so let's flip our card over. And this card.
Wait. That's the same thing as C.
Oh, y'all are right. Why do you think that it's the same picture as C?
Raise
your hand. Why do you think it's the same picture? Because K and C have the same picture. They're both the camera card. Why do you think that is? What do you think it is, Emma? They both make the same sound.
But we get it mixed up then. Because we get the same thing.
You think so? Well, let's look at here. Before we listen to our sound spelling card on the board, there's more than one way that we can spell the letter K. We can spell it K. You can spell it C, and then you can spell it CK. All right? And you notice this green box in front of the CK? That tells you that when you write CK, it's always going to be after a short vowel sound. All right? Because remember when we talked about the lamb card, it had that green band at the bottom, and that tells us that that makes the short A sound. So you're only going to write CK after a short vowel sound in a word. All right, so let's look over here and let's watch our sound spelling card.
Camera. Carlos has a new camera. When he takes pictures, his camera makes a clicking sound like this. In the garden, Carlos takes pictures of caterpillars crawling on tail. At the zoo, Carlos takes pictures of a camel, a duck, and a kangaroo. In the park, Carlos takes pictures of his cousin flying a kite. In his room, Carlos takes pictures of his cute kitten, Cozy. Can you help Carlos take pictures with his camera?
Oh, Carlos. All right. So, what sound does Carlos's camera make? Very good. All right, what we're going to do now is I want to think of some words that begin with the sound, and then let's do that first. Who can help me and tell me a word that begins with the sound? Tell me a word, Lucas. Okay. Okay, it does. But when we spell cat, it's spelled with a C. So we'll make, let's see, we'll make some columns.
Column.
Mm-hmm. If it begins with a C, we'll write it in this column.
Okay.
Let's think of some other words though that begin with
Cat.
That's what you said. You said cat, didn't you? You said cat. Alright. Let's see, Jennifer. Kangaroo. That's a big word. And she's right. It begins with the k sound and it begins with K. Good job, Jennifer. Alright. Tell me another word that begins with K. Lacey. Kite. Fun to fly kites on a windy day. Alright. Tell me another word, Roger. Cake. Alright, so cake, it does have that k sound, but when we write it with a C. We spell it with a C at the beginning. Alright. Tell me another one, Brooke.
Caught.
Caught. Like you caught a fish. Yeah, alright. So caught, you caught a fish. Alright. Mason B. Click. Mason S. Cupcake. Alright, so we have a few words up here that begin with the k sound. Now, I want to write some words that end with the k sound. And so I'm going to write our green box. And then remember, if it follows a short vowel, we're going to end it with CK. So I want you to tell me some words that have a short vowel and end with the k sound. James? It ends with k. Thanks, and I'll come back to you, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Alright, Vanessa. You're talking about over here. Well, so what is that word? Sound it out. You sounded it out. Flick. She's right. It has the CK sound at the end. Alright. Give me another one. Noah. Okay. Well, Carlos begins with k, doesn't it? But do you hear it at the end? No. So we're not going to write it in this column. Alright. Tell me one. Marina. It ends with the k sound. Think, and I'll come back to you. James, did you ever think of a word? What word ends with the k sound?
I was thinking of cupcake, but it doesn't.
Well, it does end with the k sound, but it doesn't have a short vowel, so it doesn't end with CK. But you're right, it doesn't end.
This observation was with a first grade teacher who's new to our district. She had taught second grade in another district but was new to us. And as reading coach, part of my job is I am to go in to all the new teachers and just kind of check in with them and make sure that they're comfortable with the rigor that TES expects. So even though this teacher had a year under her belt, she did fall in that criteria for me. Our school has adopted open court for the phonics program only to try to remedy a phonics situation that we've taken note of, in which the other grade levels seem to be lacking in areas of phonics since the implementation of the new standards and such. So I came in on this portion of her reading block. Open court is very scripted and must be done consistently in order for it to be effective. So my observation was twofold. I was watching through the eyes of an administrator, looking for those signs of whether or not the teacher took into account learning differences, multicultural situations, gender sensitivity, and the ethnic appreciation. At the same time, I was continuing my role as reading coach and taking note of her ease with the open court curriculum and her ability to expand on teachable moments. As I started the observation, I took a view of the learning environment, and I wanted to see, was it uncluttered? Did the environment seem sensitive to both genders? Was there any multicultural or ethnic relevance to the atmosphere? Were centers clearly marked? Were goals and scales clear? And were they where the students could refer to them? I also wanted to see, did her goals and skills reflect learning differences? Did they also take note of sensitivity to multiculturalism? And did she have a library that supported both literary and informational text, as well as ethnic differences? And did she have titles that would appeal to both genders? So I took a look at all that. I took note of her teaching presence and the students' engagement. She was using sufficient academic language. She was equally respecting results from both genders. I noticed that she was she didn't seem to be biased to one side or the other. She was taking note of all subgroups. So I also wanted to see, was her conversation rich and rigorous? Did she hone in on situations and student abilities to use context clues? So as I observed all these things, the result of my observation concluded that there are areas that this teacher could have some assistance. As I observed this teacher, and even when my attention was not right on her, I noticed that her pace was very slow and quite monotone. I remember thinking, how do you tell someone that they need to change their voice pattern or they're going to put the kids to sleep? But her students were attentive and they were very well managed. Her environment was clear of clutter and it looked very well organized. In the age of Pinterest, one of the things I look for is to make sure that the classrooms don't become too busy. With Pinterest, classrooms have become more decorative and they're cute, and it definitely gives it more of a at-home feel. But I have cautioned teachers in the past that sometimes they need to be attentive to the patterns and the colors, and that they can have a negative result on the different disabilities, as well as the gender sensitivity. If you have an all-pink classroom, that may be adorable, but remember, you do have boys in the classroom as well, and they may not be as attuned to having a pink classroom. But this teacher had a good balance with yellow and gray chevron, and it had a blue background, so it was very calming, and I felt like it really supported all those issues I was looking for. As I looked through, there was not any evidence in her goals and scales of taking notes of different cultures or ethnics or anything like that. She did take note of the different learning differences and things like that, but nothing of ethnicity and the cultures. I looked to see if her calendar had any dates that identified celebrations of other cultures, but I did not see any. I am not aware of any that would have been going on in this particular month, but she didn't have any that stuck out. Her goals and scales were posted, but they seemed to be only relevant to the teacher, not necessarily to the student. It seemed more of something for her to refer to, even though where they were posted for the student, it wasn't anything that would be relevant for them to look at. I also noted that there weren't, like I said, she addressed the learning differences, but there wasn't really any evidence of the multicultural or the ethnicity. But she did a great job of identifying the learning differences and making sure she addressed that. I did not see a library at all. I was not sure why after a year she hadn't built even a small one, but there wasn't any. Now, I did an observation later because there were a few concerns that I'm going to come across here soon that I wanted to address before I continued further. So I ended the observation pretty short in because I wanted to give her an opportunity to address some of the things that I noted. As you could see in the video, I did include some of the other observation, and some changes were made. When I went in the next time, she did have more of a library, although the library was almost 100% literary. I saw some titles that kind of appealed to probably either gender, but still nothing to address the multiculturalism or ethnicity. So with that, I also talked to her about I was going to help her build a library with some scholastic points and things that I have. So I also took note that with our curriculum, we have a series of books within the science and social studies curriculum that those should also be out there. So I made mention of that to her. So if nothing else, she should at least have those books out in her library. Her academic language seemed low level, and I noted several teachable moments that she passed over. I have a feeling that this is due to the fact that she feels bound by the scripted words of open court. So that is another thing that I addressed with her, is that yes, open court is very scripted and you have that manual in front of you, but the manual doesn't know your students. You know your students. So when a teachable moment comes up, take advantage of it and give those students an opportunity to stretch that learning further. So that was a big point that we talked about in our post-conference. As she called on the students, she appeared to call on male and female students equally, and I didn't see any signs of her leaving students out of the other cultures or ethnics. She did have the different ethnicities in there. She had several that came from the Spanish community and one that came from an Asian community. So there were opportunities for her to bring them into things more, but I didn't see any of that happen. I couldn't help but think that she would have more success with making sure she included more if she had more of a student management system in which she called on students based on pulling sticks, or a student generator, or something that was a little bit less her making that decision. This also, we spoke in our post-conference that this would allow the students to stay more attuned, because they don't know if they're going to be called. They may not. And a lot of them, especially with the student generators, they get pretty excited to see if their name's going to come up there or not. So I was able to observe her using some technology. She has a smart board, and when she was doing the letter sound, she brought up a short little video where a character kind of helped with the sound of the letter that she was doing. But even with that, she lacked rich conversation, and there wasn't much guidance through, with the students through context clues, which she had the ability to do by having them analyze the sound card and patterns that create that sound. With open chord, again, it's very scripted and it's very direct, and those sound cards become very important. And she had an opportunity to analyze the sound card and the colors that are used to implement certain things, and she passed over that opportunity. So, for example, one point she had mentioned the green box indicating that a short vowel was needed before the letter CK in order to make the K sound, but she never explored it any further. She could have taken the words they supplied and pointed out through color coding the short vowel before CK versus other versions. So each time she could have solidified that idea. There were also other opportunities to take the learning to a whole new level by releasing it to the students. There was not much student release. She was taking control of the classroom throughout most of it. She was having them supply words that began with the K sound, and then there were several opportunities where she could have handed the pen over and let them spell out the words. There were very few times where the students were given the opportunity to own their own learning. So that's where I had stopped the video. The next time I came in and did the video, she was doing a story map, and she had it up on the board, and she was going through that with them. And again, she was controlling most of the teaching. There was very little opportunity for the students to release it to the students and let them find those clues within the plot that led to the next detail to the next detail. So she's got a lot of teacher-led moments still, and again, I think that's due to being bound by the curriculum and being new, and that release is usually the hardest piece for some of those newer teachers. So because I was not getting the best of this teacher, that's why I went ahead and stopped after 10 minutes. And I had debated on coming back on a different lesson, and I did. And I also thought about choosing someone else, but I decided to stay with this teacher because I wanted to see her growth after we had that conversation. So I know we have some work to do with this teacher, and I want to expand on it further with her. I did conference with her after the video, and I videoed the conference but have not included it on here. But we talked about the multiculturalism and the ethnicity and bringing all that in and all the different points that I brought up. I praised her on how well the class was managed and that they seemed very in tune. She was very eager to hear what I had to say. We talked on many of the things that I spoke of, and she asked questions and even asked if I would come in and do some modeling so that she could explore that further. I asked her how she handles being aware of other cultures and ethnics, since those were the areas that I saw little evidence of, and she admitted kind of shyly that she hadn't really thought about it. So we have set up a model plan for her, and her and I are going to work together, and I'm really excited to see this teacher grow. I think she's excited and willing to take the information, and so as predicted, this observation mirrored very much of what I would do as a reading coach, but now as coach, instead of administrator, as coach, I'm able to go in and I'm able to assist this teacher and talk with her and support her and model through all these areas that we talked about, and get her ready then for the administrator to come in and do more of a formal observation. And so through this process, I was able to see as an administrator, but I'm excited because now I have more of an idea of how I can help this teacher further. So as an administrator, if I was doing this as an administrator, I would pair her up with the support that she needed. And I would also meet with that support and come up with I would meet with the support and I would come up with a plan, and then that support facilitator would go in and set a date. And as an administrator, I would follow up with that support facilitation and see where they are in the process. And once the support facilitator felt as though the teacher was ready, then as the administrator, I would go back into the classroom and see where we are on these things that I took note of and took and conferenced with her about. And hopefully we wouldn't need much more, but if we did, then we would do the same process over, meeting with the support facilitator and getting her more help. So, thank you.